Hey, good morning to those of you out there on the West Coast. Good afternoon to those of you here on the East Coast with me. We're going to get started in a second. If you were with me yesterday, I was sharing 5 things I did right as a government contractor in my 2 government contracting businesses. And today, I'm going to share 5 mistakes I made that hopefully you'll be able to learn from. I'm going to go ahead and turn my captions off and get started here and dive into our slides. So we're going to get started in today's training about costly GovCon mistakes I made that I hope you can avoid just by hearing what I went through and some of the lessons I took away myself, saying, okay, I'm never doing this again. And one of the things, if you haven't seen the details of the training or in the description of this video, et cetera, is that I lost 80% of my revenue in one single day. And we're talking about millions. We were doing close to $10 million when this happened, and just kind of on our journey. And in one single day, and I'll talk about how that I lost it, but that was such a massive hit to me, right? And it was something I said, I never want this to happen again. I also spent millions on the wrong people. I was very good at what I did, my subject matter area of expertise. It's IT, right? SharePoint network engineering is my area of expertise. So I was very good at that, but running a business, a lot of that is new for me and for those of us who are just starting our first business or something. So you're learning all these different things and you tend to set these expectations. Well, that was another major mistake I made that I'm going to share with you today. And hopefully it'll help you avoid millions, literally in salaries and bonuses, et cetera, or company profit share, but millions of dollars that went into wasted decisions, right? Not bad people necessarily, just it was the wrong people, wrong investments. And that was a huge deal as it went forward. And, if you've ever heard my journey, I came out of that, but it's pretty expensive lessons that I want to help you avoid. And that's why I'm saying here, the business is hard, right? When you get in, it's not easy. If it was easy, everybody would do it. So it's hard. It's just hard work. But as you go forward, hopefully you make new mistakes, not the same mistakes you can learn from people like me and others who have gone before you. There's a lot of us out there who share our lessons learned, and I'm hoping you take advantage of them. And today is my chance to share some of those. So I'm going to break down the 5 mistakes I made in my government contracting business into these 5 major mistakes. These aren't the only mistakes I made. I made a lot of mistakes, but these are the 5 top ones that I really personally would avoid going forward, and I really want to make sure that you're hearing and avoiding. So the first one is I didn't diversify my customers enough. Second one I'm going to talk about is I just hired senior federal employees in military thinking they were magic, and it was a mistake on multiple levels I'll talk about, but also setting them up a little bit maybe for failure. 3 is I ignored leading indicators, and this is huge. When you look at your success, basically I say all the time, government contracting is not a secret; it's a process. And when you think about a process, your process is what you're trying to go to achieve something. It could be your goal. It could be just, an activity or something that's done. But that process, as you watch the process towards that thing you want to get, those are leading indicators. And I ignored those. And I'll talk about those today. A huge mistake I made was micromanaging people. And I'm going to talk about that because I think if I had to pick one mistake and put it at the top, that was it. That was the major lesson I learned coming out of my business, that I said, I'm never doing that again. I'm still the exact same person, but I tweaked it, and I'll show you how. And then number 5, I spent too much time in the business instead of on the business. If you've been in business for any amount of time, you hear some, wise person like me say, hey, you should be working on your business, not in your business. I literally was saying that while working in my business. And there's a difference between believing it and living that. And I want to share that lesson with you. So that's what I'm going to talk about today as we move forward. If you don't know who I am, my name is Neil McDonald. I'm the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce, and I want to welcome you to my federal sales training where I provide tips for success in the federal market. I spent 20 years in the federal market as a small business owner after I got out of the Army. And since 2018, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting, it's not a secret. It's just a process. When we follow a process A to Z, we have repeatable, predictable results. And this is what I want for you. It's why I come back day after day. If you haven't subscribed to my newsletter here on LinkedIn, it's Government Contracting Success Newsletter. I joined 28 out of 1,000 people who were subscribed to it. It's where I put out content that I think can be the most tactical tips for you. And almost every single newsletter article I put out is what we call evergreen, meaning you could see it a year later and it is still very valuable for you in going forward. I tend to try to avoid topical things like, hey, the Super Bowl just happened. Let's talk about how the Seahawks did. And then the other thing is, if you're not on LinkedIn and following me, make sure you're following me. Hit the bell notification so you can get notified of things I put out there. This morning, I just put out the Army Contracting Command down in Orlando. They did a PALT, and I see my friend Dave Waltz in here. Maybe he'll put out what PALT stands for. But they just put out notice about major initiatives they're working on, and it's where you can find key points of contact and what they're responsible for, et cetera. But it's 52 pages or something that I just put out on LinkedIn, and I don't want you to miss those kind of things. I almost never put out fluff, except for yesterday afternoon, but generally never fluff. And then tomorrow's training, just wanted to let you know that tomorrow's training is, if I had to start again, what would I do? This training is absolutely valuable for people who are just thinking about it or just getting started. It's like, hey, this is exactly what I would do. The high level steps. But the other thing is, it's helpful for those of you maybe at a stuck phase. It's like, well, let me look at what he would have done if he started over again and make sure I'm doing those in my first year or first million. Dave doesn't say much, but when he's talking about the Seahawks, he's there. Okay, I got 24 minutes to talk about 5 mistakes that took me a long time to make. So the first one is, I didn't diversify my my customers, right? That was a huge one as I went forward, is that when I started my last company, we were known as the SharePoint guys. And so we did SharePoint better than almost anybody out there. And I can come back later and expand another day about how we really got to that stage on purpose. But we got noticed by $1 billion company, Booz Allen, and they really appreciated what we did. And we were able to go in there and build up a book of business with them. And basically, we were charging $125 an hour. And so fundamentally, every person we got in there was billing out at $250,000. Every 4 was $1 million. And that was really predictable for us. And we kept growing with Booz Allen because we were helping them internally. And then they saw how we could help them with their customers. And ironically, not inside of, like, let's say a Navy customer, but they had these large contracts that they had to execute on. And the execution was where we were helping them with, the administrative part of the execution of a contract. So they did the contract themselves, and we helped them in the back end on the administration. Anyways, they loved us. We loved them. We walked in, we looked like rock stars every time we were able to help them basically increase their competitiveness over Northrop Grumman or whoever else, right? They really liked us. And so it was a fun, exciting thing. And we had 80% of our revenue going in there. I call it, Booz Allen was our golden goose at that time, because literally I felt like we were placing a new person on their projects at, once every 2 weeks, let's say. And so we were growing really well. And we were really getting our chops into what we did. Anyways, we became super blinded and over dependent on. I became super blinded and over dependent on it. And then one day the government cut off the faucet. They turned the faucet off. And this is, I think, in a sequestration. You see some of this stuff happen. Last year it was Doge coming in, but something happens and the faucet gets turned off. Well, Booz Allen's faucet got turned off. And so all their people who were working at government sites where the contracts got slowed down or canceled came in, and Booz is like, well, we're not going to get rid of our people. And they said, hey, Neil, thanks a lot. You guys can go. And they gave us a 1-day notice, basically, because we're at the end of their fiscal year. And in a 1-day thing, they said, you're not continuing. We had like to the end of the month to keep billing out with them, but they cut it off. There was no more revenue. And we lost 80% of our revenue. So we were massively focused on them. And that was a huge hit. I'm positive you can imagine that thing. Well, there was a big takeaway for us. And that was a major step forward on my business maturity and really understanding how to protect myself and my company and grow. And it's a foundation of a lot of what I teach constantly. There's 3 ways to make money in the federal government. You can make money subcontracting under a small. You can make money directly with a federal agency, prime contracting. And you can make money with a large prime, subcontracting under them. And that's basically what we were doing, right? They were billing our efforts to their customers. And so we were subcontracting under them. What I should have done is to make sure that I had 33% coming from each one of those customers. You can watch other training I do where I talk about now, as you grow, not in the early stage, but certainly the stage I was at this point, I should have had 8 Booz Allens lined up. So I'm diversifying not just across the 3 ways to make money, but across the others. And so this might take away for you, right? Is that no customer should account for more than 40% of your revenue. You should be able to lose an entire customer and know how your employees will be able to stay with you and for how long, right? That's a whole bigger training type thing I do. But that's the way you can see you're at risk, though, is that you're leaning heavier and heavier into maybe one federal agency, or like I did, heavier and heavier into one teaming partner, and putting all your hope for growth into that relationship. Maintain that relationship, just triple it with a few others. Okay, that was mistake number one. I didn't diversify my revenue. My second mistake, and this one's it gave me a little pause as I was going forward to make sure I'm not insulting people, but I hired senior federal employees, so civilian employees who are at like the SES level. If you don't know the SES level, you've got GS levels that go up to 15, and then above that is senior executive service. So basically, if you think about the military, these are more like colonels or generals or something. And then the flip side, hiring senior level 06 and above military or just people retiring, even enlisted, who are coming out with 20 plus years of experience. And so the big eye opener is for me, well, there was multiple in this, but I mistook that these people who had senior level leadership positions were responsible. Sometimes they were responsible for, $1 billion here or thousands of employees, but I didn't understand that they weren't business people. They were in a complete bureaucracy, right? When I was in the military and the Rangers, down at the lowest level, there's a lot of autonomy and you're moving forward. But the higher you go, the more senior you are. Frankly, there's less autonomy and more structure around the decisions that are being made. There's very formal guidance documents, standard operating procedures, process documents, et cetera, that guide how senior people do it. And the reason this was a big mistake, one of the reasons with hiring senior government employees, was that they didn't know how to operate in this fly by the seat of your pants kind of an environment. They're like, what are you doing? You're so disorganized. It's like, yeah, that's us. It's like, and I should have understood that better, because you could still find military people and civilian employees who would fit that model. But I just assumed anybody in a high ranking position would be able to come in, take charge. I'm like, oh, and I was an enlisted guy, right? And so I just had this higher than normal expectation for an officer. I'm like, we always look to the officers. We always look to the officers to take charge, right? And so you come in, oh, my company's going to be golden. But no, they had such a big learning curve that I was not really paying attention to that. I missed that these new employees coming out of the government, right? They're used to moving in years. We used to say that we move in birthdays. And so that was normal movement speed for them. And for a small business who's really starving for revenue and trying to grow, we move in months or even weeks trying to figure out, how do I move forward? Literally, we have situations where, you have a single parent, you're trying to figure out how to help them, and customers screaming about something else, and you're still trying to be billable and deliver. That's the environment I was taking somebody from a very mature bureaucratic entity, the government, and bring him down into chaos. And I didn't really, and that's why I said early on, I don't feel like I positioned them well either. Last thing is, I missed that they're not good at networking. I needed them for sales. So if I was pulling them out of, let's say, the Army, I'm thinking you're going right back into the Army and selling. But that's not what any of these employees within the government naturally do. That's not a normal thing. You can find a random person who actually goes out networking. But when I bring somebody like that into my company, I'm expecting them to go right back out, learn every aspect of the Army, build new relationships. But what they tend to do, what some of us tend to do, is to just gravitate back to the people who you're comfortable with and who like you. So back to your unit or your command. But could you go across all the commands? Could you go into other services? That was something that I missed out. And so as it relates to hiring govies, not that I'm opposed to doing it. There's massive value there, just like any other person you'd bring onto your company. But set realistic expectations in there. I set expectations that were heavily around their ability to thrive in a chaos environment and to sell. And neither one of those are the strength that they come in on. But if I instead said, here, come in and make this company operate as smoothly as yours, while I go out and sell, that would have been far smarter. So that was a huge mistake there. All right, mistake number 3 that I had was, doing pretty good on time, was I ignored leading indicators. And this was a huge deal. This still is a huge deal. I think that's out there for a lot of businesses. Leading indicators are these things that tell you what's going to happen. And so if you think about I talk about the 7-step process for federal government success. Let me see if I can share something really quick. Let me maybe do this. No, wait one. Do this. Yes. Well, this is a little crowded to see, but you get my point. 7-step process. Research. If I'm trying to get into an agency, research the agency, target it by finding the right people, reach out and call them, build relationships, opportunities. Over here on the far side is proposals, and yeah, you can't see that, and then sales. So that chart's a little off. I got to go back and fix that. But anyways, the point is, I want sales. In order to get sales, I have to submit proposals. In order to get proposals out the door, I need to have opportunities in my pipeline and so on. Well, those are leading indicators. If I don't have enough opportunities in my pipeline, then I know I'm not going to make sales. And on that third biggest mistake that I had, I ignored a lot of the leading indicators that were out there, especially as it related to senior people. They would come on and I would hire them, and the interview goes good or something, and I would have high expectations. And I would just let them kind of go. And even when there was these signals that, whether the developer or an engineer who's doing the work or people writing proposals or doing business development, all of them have leading indicators that are out there that could have been measured that I wasn't measuring. I was focusing too much on how much I liked them, frankly, and their personalities. It's like, oh, and they were here, and government people were doing this kind of stuff, or business developers are talking about how they go to this conference and they meet all these people. I'm like, oh yeah, that sounds exciting. If you're not familiar with this term, in the old days before the computer, we had something called Rolodexes, and that's where you had all these business cards, and people would flip through Rolodexes to find a business card of somebody they had met or something. And so they would have Rolodex, and that was actually really a protected asset that we would have as salespeople. We'd move from place to place, and a lot of times you wouldn't share it, which I hated. Now with the internet, it's gone, right? The idea of protecting that's gone. But people would come in with these Rolodexes and talk about how they knew all these people. Well, I've learned since then, I don't care who you know. I care about whether you can meet more people, because these people might be gone. So I ignored, especially on the sales side, things like the weak pipeline. I would look in and the pipeline didn't have enough opportunities, or didn't have enough dollar value, total contract value in the pipeline, or it was weak. I was looking at the pipeline and I would see things that people were rationalizing. There's something I say now very strongly since 2018, that if anybody in your company has to rationalize an opportunity in the pipeline, it's not a real slam dunk opportunity for your company. And that's what I mean by weak pipeline, is that you have opportunities in there that just are not slam dunk, and they distract from us finding the real stuff. And these are leading indicators. If we can't find the right opportunities, then how can we possibly win them, right? If this person I'm hiring is not able to do that, if they're not getting the meetings, that's a big deal. If I have program managers who are not paying attention to the profit and loss on a contract. Give you a quick example. If you have a 5-year contract, base year with 4 options, and I'm not here to discuss this with contracting officers and argue about it, but you can figure out how to bring that money forward. You can figure out how to bring those tasks forward. Well, that's P&L responsibility for a company and a sales person. Is your job is to take the $1 million a year, 5-year contract that the government has given us and convince them it's better for them to give you $1.5 or $2 million a year. Doesn't mean you're bamboozling them. It means, hey, I can get these things into production sooner, so they help the people doing the mission. That's all profit loss. Well, I can see that, and I ignored that. P&L was just normal. Whatever started was going. It's like, well, what do I need a senior person for if you're not able to make sure that my profits are increasing? And the last one, most importantly, I think, was I was afraid to fire anybody. I hated the very idea of it. I wasn't afraid of talking about it. I didn't. And I mean, the number of conversations I've had with my wife in the old days about, this person at work, blah, 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 because you don't want to be talking to anybody else. Otherwise, you're gossiping, right? Here, I get to let off steam. or something, but I was afraid of firing people. And that was bad for them and me. They could have been in a much better position in a company that was a better fit for them. And I could have found somebody who could come in. One last thing about that, I was afraid to fire anyone. That also negatively impacted the morale. Not as bad as my next mistake, but it negatively impacted morale in the sense that people would go, I know that person's not doing any work. How come Neil's not, letting them go? There's been too much conversation. And so that's a big mistake that I had, missing the leading indicators that tell me whether something's going to be a success or not, whether we're doing in my business what needs to be a success. And so my takeaway for you is everyone should prove themselves in the first 30 days. If I get a new person, they're an intern or a very junior employee, you often hear about they get a 30-day or 90-day probation. In my opinion, every single person who comes into a company should have a 30-day or 90-day probation. If I hire somebody in who says they're a senior business developer, well, I want you identifying opportunities within the very first day. Why would I wait for a second day for you to learn about my business? You should have done that before you even had the job interview, right? And so we tend to cut people with senior experience too much slack. We should demand in the first 30 days that they're, especially if it's sales, for example, that they're identifying opportunities that align with us, that they're getting meetings or they're outreaching. If they're not landing meetings, they've reached out to hundreds of people in that first 30 days. A senior person could do this. And they're not saying to me, hey, I need you to pay for me to go to a conference so I can walk around. No, pick up the phone. And those are leading indicators. If they do those kind of activities, then I go, looks good. Looks like the next 90 days and beyond will be great. I feel like every one of these mistakes I could stretch out to its own individual training. Okay, so there is no mistake bigger than that I've ever made in my professional career than micromanaging. Pretty much, I used to micromanage even when I wasn't in a position to manage role. And sometimes it survived the activity, but the reality is people don't like to be micromanaged, and that's what I was doing, right? In my last company in particular. And so when I sold my company and I came out and I started the GovCon Chamber, before I started that, I was doing some YouTube videos, and I got to see if I still have it out there. But I did a video that said, my name is Neil McDonald and I'm a micromanager. And the idea behind this was to sit there and just recognize one of my biggest failings as a business owner was I was just very hyper-focused on making sure no one was making mistakes, then the quality going out. I was very, very driven towards the mission. We were supporting the VA and Department of Defense and some other places. And it was really, really important to me that there was no mistakes. I'm a guy who plays in the IT world. I hate the term bug in software development. Software would be released and somebody say, oh, there's a bug. No, there's a mistake you left in. And I used to really get pretty passionate about it. Now I don't care because I just control the development completely in the process side of it. But I was very focused on this, and this is just a legacy thing for the environment I grew up in. But I was constantly holding meetings with people and trying to get them to come in and say, let me hear what's going on. What's going on in this customer site? What are you doing here? Tell me about this. And one of my other problems in there was I was very technical. So I knew the job everybody was doing. I could personally do every job in the company. And so I knew those jobs, and I would just get hyper-focused on analyzing it instead of just trusting them and leaving them to it. I would look over people's shoulders to this point where I was impacting morale, right? And it wasn't like overly out there, but this is my feeling that I know I made. It was a big mistake that I made in my business. But I didn't know, I didn't have any clarity of it until I sold my company and left. And I started really trying to, look at my businesses and go, what can I do better? How can I do it on the sales side? How can I professionally grow? All those kind of things. And the thing I realized, and I think what I said in the video when I said, my name is Neil McDonald, I'm a micromanager. There's nothing wrong with being a micromanager. My problem was I was micromanaging people. I was just basically attacking them with my micromanagement approach. Instead, I should have said, oh, Sally, no, totally understand. I don't know why it didn't work. Let me take the process home and look at it and go home, take the process, yell at the process, because that's who I'm really bothered at. I should have been micromanaging my processes and procedures within the company And if somebody wasn't doing something that wasn't meeting my expectation, first I should have clarified the expectation with them. Then I just to make sure, hey, is this a false expectation or good? And then I should have aligned the process and the procedures with them to make sure that any of us following it could achieve the expected outcome I had and that they agreed on. This is fundamental process improvement. So anyways, that's a big one in there. And my takeaway is micromanage your processes, your procedures, right? Have very clear stuff, and you'll never have to micromanage good people. And in my last company, everybody was good. And so any of the weak areas that were in there, it was me and my lack of focusing on the process. Okay, and then the last mistake, not the last mistake, the last mistake I'm telling you about at the moment is that I spent too much time working in the business instead of on the business. This is a classic thing within any small business world, is that, and we're told, hey, don't work on your business or in your business, work on your business. And that's a growth thing. If you're working in your business, like let's say you're a roofer, then you're up on the roof and you're working on the roofs and you go from customer to customer, but you're never really focusing on growing your company or working on your company to improve the processes, et cetera, because you're too busy in the business doing the work. And that was a huge failing of mine. My first government contracting business, I was known as we were known as the server guys, but I was a server guy. I was certified network engineer. So I would be able to go in, I could fix problems. I could analyze what was going on with Dell and HP and Compaq and all these computer companies that were out, and work with them on just understanding how to, put the tools in place. Well, I could have hired for that. I did hire for that, but I always kind of was in there. This particular company, actually my first one, I did a much better job at working on the business and growing it. But the second company, my last company, we were known as the SharePoint people, and we were in a lot more sensitive contracts. We had these things called Yankee White clearances. We were supporting the White House, Department of Defense, or Department of War now, right? And so, candidly looking back, or honestly looking back, right? I loved being the hero to my customers. They had a problem, no one could solve it. It's like, oh, here comes Neil, he can solve it. It's like, whatever. And there's a great book out there called Phoenix Project. If you haven't read it, read this. And a spoiler alert, the hero in there, like me trying to be a hero to my customers, they're the problem, not the solution. And they set up a rule in the book. They set up a rule for this hero. You may no longer solve anybody's problems. You may only sit at the shoulder of somebody else who's solving it, and then you must document it. And the way they did that is to try to get this person out of the picture of doing it. And then that person could help the company on much bigger things. Or in me, I could start working on the business instead of in it. I also thought it was easier to just do the work than trust the people I had or enable them and empower them with the right things that they needed to succeed. I'm like, oh, I'll get it. I'll do it. And that kind of goes back to that hero syndrome probably. But as I'm going forward, right, I could have grown more. My business could have grown more if I had focused more on empowering and enabling my team through teaching them, by making sure that they had what they needed to grow profit and loss, to be able to solve IT problems in the middle of the night, to do sales, all those kind of things. And I could have grown my company if I had focused a lot more on inbound instead of outbound sales. I was doing sales, almost all of the sales in both my companies. And it was because I was good at building relationships, but it was all outbound sales. I was talking to people, going from one person to the other. But if I had stopped and worked on my business, then I would have realized I wasn't doing any inbound. It's what I teach heavily now, is that inbound sales is vital. But I would have focused on inbound sales, meaning making sure buyers could find us, making sure our great stories were visible to all federal buyers, not just the ones I talked to. And so that was a big one in there. And so what I'm saying here is the takeaway is accept risk in order to focus on your business. I was worried about anything failing, but the reality is it's not the end of the world if somebody screws something up in a customer contract, as long as something gets solved. We address it, we move on. But I should have trusted my people. If I had done that, I could have worked on the business, and that's really important. But you have to accept risk in order for that to happen. All right, here's what I want you to remember from this training. Diversify your federal revenue across those 3 revenue streams I mentioned. And then in each one of the revenue streams, as you grow, diversify it a little more around one core competency. Second thing is hold everyone in your company to realistic expectations and regular metrics, not just the junior people who they need our help, et cetera. Well, even senior people need help to come in and succeed within your organization. And then the third one is it's okay to micromanage as long as you keep your micromanagement to the processes and procedures that run your company and not the people. Okay, if you found value in this training, tell a friend. Otherwise, I will see you back tomorrow.